When I was very small, my first memories were of a pristine lake in a very rural location. The road out front was not that busy. Most of the cottages around the lake were small seasonal camps. Lots of fish of different species were jumping. It was an extraordinarily beautiful spot. And then it all crashed, and it all fell apart.
It's the pervading factor right here in the lakes region, all right? Lake. If you didn't have any lake, you wouldn't have much.
Coming out of the 50s with a rapid expansion out of World War II, consumerism was on the rise. There's a huge amount of buying and selling going on. Property starts to move in the Lakes region. People start looking for second homes, vacation homes. So coming out of the 50s and going into the 60s, you have this enormous demand for Lakes region properties.
They used to have homes out there that on the waterfront that had one pipe with all the trash going in and the other pipe next to it with the water coming out for drinking.
I was in the real estate business, sold lots of lakefront properties, and I would say that half of the properties at that time, the storage was going into the lake.
In the early days, dumping untreated effluent or even some semi-treated effluent into the lakes was on such a small scale that it wasn't causing a problem, but now came all this new development, and it was overpowering the system.
For algae, sewage is food. Best kind of food they can get. And you hit any organism or thing like that with food, it's going to multiply.
Every year in the summertime when the weather got warm, they had algae blooms. These algae blooms were nuisance algae blooms. The lake would turn like pea soup. People were getting very irritated about it. Some of the local businessmen, particularly the ones that had motels and relied on tourists, the tourists would come up and say, "We don't want to swim in this stuff, you know."
If you held up a glass of it or cupped it in your hands or something, it looks just like pea soup. Little tiny fine green critters, actually vegetation. And it was thick. And of course, people didn't want to swim in that. You'd come out feeling slimy.
To get rid of the algae, they'd put copper sulfate in the lake. They'd get a bunch of rowboats with outboard motors on them, and they'd put copper sulfate, solid copper sulfate in burlap bags, and they would run up and down the lake in a pattern so that the copper sulfate would dissolve and it would kill the algae. And immediately after they treated it, within a day or so, the lake was, they called it gin clear, because it was clear. The algae immediately died and settled to the bottom.
The decomposition of that algae would rob the water of all the oxygen. So if you get below the thermocline, there was no oxygen below that, and fish couldn't survive.
There was a summer, I don't remember what year it was, but there was a summer in 1969, 70, maybe 71, when all the fish died. And it wasn't as if, well, the fish sort of gradually declined. All at once, all the fish died. And there were thousands of fish washing up on shore and rotting. Thousands of fish. You could walk along the shore, and every step you would take, there would be 3 or 4 fish lying there dead.
When the algae died, it gave off toxins which killed a lot of fish. And he said, but the reason we're having these algae blooms is because of the city of Laconia sewage treatment plant. He says it really needs to be upgraded. It's only primary treatment, so they're just treating the stuff to kill the bacteria.
I was aware of the algae bloom. I went out and looked at it myself, and so I was, there's no question in my mind that it was occurring. However, I wasn't convinced that it was entirely the fault of the city of Laconia.
Well, we got a sewage treatment plant. Why worry about it? We're treating the sewage, we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, until they found out that primary sewage treatment was not very much of a treatment at all. Primary sewage treatment was merely allowing the sewage to settle for about 2 hours. The solids would go to the bottom and the liquids and whatever would float would go to the top. And then they'd put a disinfectant in it, chlorine, and kill whatever bacteria there was in the liquid level in there, and then they dump it into the lake.
The Laconia State School, yes, they had quite a population up there, and I was up there several times, and their sewers, I don't think there was any treatment. A straight shot right in.
And we find that of all the tributaries to the lake, the 2 small discharges from the sewage treatment plants located on the shores of the lake are contributing maybe 0.03% of the total volume of water, yet they contribute about 2/3 of the total phosphorus input from all of the tributaries.
It was all through the water. Yeah. It wasn't a layer on top like this.
Right. It was.
But yes, the lake looked like that.
Yeah.
What we had to do is work with the community. That's the only thing you can do is work with the community and let them know what's going on. And once you inform the community, things begin to click. Things begin to change.
So he had to get people from all those different areas in and got them speaking with one voice and got them big enough and loud enough so that these different little municipalities would pay attention. So that's what we got to do.
They could see a decline in quality of all the lakes, although we were by far the worst because we got the sewage. But the city of Meredith, the sewage went in the lake too. So that impelled these people to form the organization. I came in several months after they had been formed. I saw a newspaper article about a meeting they had had, and I said to myself, hey, that's for me. I got to get in. And I did.
To be perfectly blunt, they were a gadfly, they were an irritation, they were a pressure point.
I was on the radio 5 days a week. I was on the radio for an hour. I had guests, but I could say, oh yeah, and by the way, if you've been meaning to join the Clean Waters Association, oh yes, and by the way, you know, just in thing, the Clean Waters Association is meeting tonight in Moulton Borough. Do come if you're interested or curious.
She used to be in the window of the Woolworth store with her program and her mic and things like that. Every time I passed by she'd bang the window, come on in.
I got people in who were interested in health, doctors who cared about it. Not all doctors did, but some did. Lawyers who cared about it, and real estate people who cared about it. They couldn't sell real estate on the edge of the lake that was a sewer. Come on. Got all those people together, got them all talking, gave them a voice interviewed them on the radio. Things are going to happen.
By 1969 or 70, the matter had become much more urgent. And by that time, the Clean Waters Association was actively involved. They were pointing out from their perspective that algae blooms were becoming more and more prevalent on Lake Winnipesaukee, and they naturally felt that at least a considerable part of the problem laid with the city of Laconia and its plant.
This was what the city of Laconia had for a sewage treatment plant. That was the operations building there. And these are digesters where the sewage hopefully got treated. And this was a settling tank. But the plant was overloaded and the sewage was going through so fast that none of this really had any effect. Now I think they had a pressure manhole right out there. That may be the same one. And a pressure manhole is a structure in the sewer outfall where it has a heavy, heavy steel cover that's supposed to withstand the pressure and keep the sewage in the pipe. Well, they were running so much sewage through that pipe, it would lift the cover up.
The sewage treatment plant not only treated the sewage, but it also had stormwater coming in, so the storm drains were all connected to it. So when you'd have a big rainfall, 1 or 2 inches, it was way over capacity, and some of the sewage that normally would get treated for 2 hours didn't get treated at all.
5 years ago, I was involved with doing some remainder shut up and close up of this particular building. And what I found was that, and I'd never noticed on the prints, was that there's actually, or was, a bypass valve that worked on a float arrangement that when the flow got high enough in here, it would just open the line and it would go straight out to the lake.
In reaction to the claims of the Clean Waters Association, we did have a PR moment in the sense that we invited the press to visit the current Laconia treatment plant. And To my horror, one of the city councilors scooped up a glass of water from the outflow and proceeded to drink it.
The city of Laconia depends on the lakes for about 30% of its economy. We would be idiots if we did not do something about a problem that would deprive us of that return.
As long as we could get out there and talk to the people, I knew eventually the people would come around.
They had a good reason. Most people in New Hampshire realize how valuable water is to the state. And therefore, it was not hard to put a political base together.
The local newspaper, both newspapers, Union Leader and a Citizen, gave us really good press. They went out of their way to report on these problems, and that helped us a lot.